Hello everyone, welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we return with another bone-chilling collection of forgotten accounts buried deep in the frozen wilderness of Alaska. In this episode, we will journey into the last frontier with 8 harrowing tales of tourists who vanished without a trace in America's most unforgiving landscape. Each narrative has been meticulously compiled from official missing persons reports, search and rescue documentation, and first-hand testimonies from those who witnessed the inexplicable. These are not folklore or urban legends, but documented cases that continue to baffle investigators and haunt the families left behind. From experienced outdoorsmen who disappeared in impossible circumstances to casual travelers who walked into the wilderness never to return. These stories reveal the terrifying reality that Alaska holds secrets darker than its endless winter nights. To protect the ongoing investigations and respect the privacy of the families involved, some names and specific locations have been altered, but the essential truth of each disappearance remains intact. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Buried Files for daily true mystery content that will challenge everything you think you know about the unknown. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we uncover the files that others want to keep buried. Now let us begin our descent into the mysteries that Alaska refuses to surrender. The luxury cruise ship Northern Dreams was supposed to be the perfect honeymoon for Michael and Ashley Thompson from Dallas, but their shore excursion in a remote Alaskan village would tear their new marriage apart in the most inexplicable way. The couple had saved for 3 years to afford the premium glacier route package, complete with private balcony cabin and exclusive access to the most pristine locations along Alaska's Inside Passage. They were 28 and 26 years old, respectively, high school sweethearts who had finally made it to the altar after a decade together. Michael worked as a software engineer for a medical device company, methodical and cautious by nature, while Ashley taught 3rd grade and had an adventurous spirit that constantly pushed their relationship toward new experiences. Friends described them as perfectly complementary. Michael's careful planning balanced by Ashley's spontaneous enthusiasm. Their wedding photos showed a couple radiating happiness and anticipation for their future together. The Northern Dreams departed Seattle on August 14, 2024. Carrying 450 passengers on what was advertised as an 8-day ultimate Alaska experience. The ship's itinerary included stops at Ketchikan, Juneau, and Skagway, with a final day visiting the remote village of Hoonah on Chichagof Island. Michael and Ashley spent their first few days exactly as planned, photographing glaciers from their balcony, attending the ship's evening shows, and participating in guided excursions that kept them safely within designated tourist areas. Their fellow passengers remembered the Thompsons as an affectionate couple who seemed genuinely excited about every aspect of their Alaskan experience. Ashley collected postcards from each port, writing detailed messages to friends back home, while Michael maintained a travel blog with daily updates and carefully composed photographs. They seemed to be living their dream honeymoon until they reached Hoonah on August 20th. Hoonah is home to approximately 750 residents, mostly members of the Hoonah Tlingit tribe whose families have inhabited the area for thousands of years. The village sits on the shores of Icy Strait, surrounded by dense temperate rainforest and accessible only by boat or small aircraft. Most cruise ships dock at the modern tourist facility built specifically for visitors, but the Northern Dreams was small enough to anchor directly in the harbor, allowing passengers to take tender boats to the village dock. The scheduled shore excursion was a 4-hour cultural tour that included traditional dancing demonstrations, local art displays, and a guided walk through the historic village center. Michael and Ashley initially joined the main group, posing for photographs with traditional totem poles and purchasing handmade jewelry from local artisans. But according to other passengers, sometime around 2 p.m. Ashley became fixated on a particular section of forest visible from the village center. Margaret Stevens, a retired nurse from Portland who had befriended the couple during the cruise, later told investigators that Ashley kept pointing toward the tree line and asking their Tlingit guide about the singing. When the guide asked what she meant, Ashley described hearing voices calling her name from somewhere in the forest. The guide, an elderly man named Robert Jack, who had lived in Hoonah his entire life, immediately became serious and suggested Ashley should ignore whatever she thought she was hearing. But Ashley's behavior became increasingly agitated. She told Michael she needed to investigate the source of the voices, insisting they sounded familiar, like relatives calling for help. Michael tried to convince her to stay with the group, reminding her that they were due back on the ship by 5 p.m. and that wandering into unfamiliar wilderness was dangerous. Ashley had never shown any tendency toward irrational behavior during their relationship, which made her sudden fixation all the more concerning. At approximately 2:30 p.m., despite Michael's protests and the guide's warnings, Ashley walked away from the tour group toward the forest edge. Michael immediately followed, calling her name and trying to catch up. Margaret Stevens was the last person from the cruise to see them together, watching as they disappeared into the dense spruce and hemlock trees that surrounded the village. She described Ashley as moving with unusual purpose, as if she knew exactly where she was going despite never having visited the area before. When the couple failed to return by 4 p.m., the cruise director contacted village authorities and organized a search party. Robert Jack, despite his advanced age, immediately volunteered to help, bringing along 2 younger men familiar with the forest trails. The Hoonah Volunteer Fire Department activated their emergency response protocol, and within an hour, 25 searchers were combing the woods in a systematic grid pattern. The terrain around Hoonah is challenging. Steep ravines carved by ancient glacial activity, dense undergrowth that can hide a person just yards away, and numerous small streams that create natural barriers. The searchers expected to find the couple within a few hours, assuming they had simply gotten lost or injured on unfamiliar trails. But as daylight began to fade, the search took on an increasingly desperate tone. At 8:47 p.m., just as the organized search was preparing to continue with flashlights and headlamps, Ashley Thompson emerged from the forest alone. She was found by 2 village residents approximately half a mile from where she and Michael had entered the woods, walking calmly along a logging road that led back toward the harbor. Her appearance shocked everyone who saw her. Ashley's clothes were completely dry despite the heavy mist that had persisted all afternoon, and she showed no signs of fatigue or distress from spending 6 hours in dense wilderness. More disturbing was Ashley's behavior. When searchers approached her, she looked at them with complete confusion and asked where she was. She did not recognize the village of Hoonah, despite having spent the entire afternoon there. When asked about Michael, she stared blankly and asked who they were talking about. Ashley had no memory of being married, no recollection of the cruise ship or their honeymoon, and no awareness that she was in Alaska at all. Medical personnel from the ship examined Ashley immediately, finding no signs of head trauma, drug use, or any physical condition that might explain her memory loss. Her vital signs were normal, and she showed no symptoms of hypothermia despite spending hours in the cold, damp forest. Psychologically, she appeared calm and cooperative, but insisted her name was Ashley Morrison, her maiden name, and that she lived in Dallas with her parents. She claimed to be 22 years old and working as a substitute teacher while finishing her education degree. The most inexplicable aspect of Ashley's condition was her specific knowledge of locations she should not have been able to find. When questioned about how she had navigated through the forest, she led searchers to 3 different spots where she claimed to have rested. Each location was significant to local Tlingit history: a traditional fishing camp, a burial ground that had been abandoned for over a century, and a ceremonial site that even many village residents did not know existed. Ashley described these places in detail, using terminology that suggested deep familiarity with indigenous culture and traditions she had never studied. Meanwhile, the search for Michael intensified. Dogs were brought in from Juneau, and helicopter patrols began at first light. The search area expanded to cover over 50 square miles of wilderness, including remote valleys that had not seen human visitors in years. Despite the massive effort, no trace of Michael Thompson was ever found. No clothing, no equipment, no footprints beyond the initial tracks that showed him following Ashley into the forest. Alaska State Troopers treated the case as a potential homicide, extensively interviewing Ashley despite her apparent memory loss. Polygraph tests proved inconclusive due to her psychological condition, and medical experts were divided on whether her amnesia was genuine or fabricated. Ashley consistently maintained that she had no memory of Michael, their marriage, or the events that brought her to Alaska. She passed every medical and psychological evaluation, showing no signs of deception or mental illness. The investigation revealed troubling details about the forest area where the couple had disappeared. Local Tlingit elders, when pressed by authorities, reluctantly shared traditional warnings about certain locations in the woods. They spoke of places where the boundary between the world of the living and the dead, spirit realm, became thin, areas where people could become lost not just physically but temporally. Robert Jack, the tour guide, eventually admitted he had been reluctant to search certain areas because of childhood stories about people who entered the forest and emerged changed, sometimes decades later, sometimes as completely different individuals. Ashley was eventually returned to Dallas, where her family struggled to help her rebuild a life she could not remember living. Medical specialists across the country examined her case, but none could explain her selective amnesia or her inexplicable knowledge of Alaskan indigenous culture. She underwent hypnotherapy, cognitive rehabilitation, and experimental treatments designed to recover lost memories. But nothing restored her recollection of her life with Michael or their honeymoon. 6 months after the disappearance, Ashley began experiencing vivid dreams about walking through an endless forest, where voices called her name from every direction. In these dreams, she followed the voices deeper and deeper into the wilderness until she reached a clearing where figures in traditional Tlingit regalia waited for her. The dreams always ended the same way, with Ashley making a choice between following the figures into the forest or turning back toward a distant light that she somehow knew represented her old life. Michael's family hired private investigators who spent over a year following leads and interviewing witnesses, but the case remained unsolved. His body was never recovered despite numerous additional searches, and no evidence was found to suggest he had been the victim of an animal attack or natural disaster. The insurance companies eventually declared him dead, but his family refused to accept that conclusion. The Northern Dreams discontinued its Huna excursions after the incident, and cruise lines began requiring guided supervision for all forest activities in remote Alaskan villages. The case became a cautionary tale used in maritime safety training, though instructors struggled to explain what precautions might have prevented the tragedy. Today, Ashley lives in Dallas under her maiden name, working as an elementary school teacher with no memory of her previous life. She has never married again, claiming she feels incomplete in a way she cannot explain. Sometimes on quiet evenings, she finds herself drawn to documentaries about Alaska and indigenous cultures, watching with an intensity that she cannot understand. Friends describe her as fundamentally changed, still kind and intelligent, but carrying an indefinable sadness that seems to come from somewhere beyond conscious memory. The case of Michael and Ashley Thompson remains active in Alaska State Trooper files, though no new leads have emerged in recent years. Their story serves as a stark reminder that Alaska's wilderness holds mysteries that extend beyond the merely physical. Places where the very nature of identity and memory can be challenged in ways that science cannot yet explain. In a land where indigenous peoples have always understood that the forest holds powers beyond human comprehension, the disappearance of one person and the transformation of another stands as testimony to forces that remain as vast and unknowable as the Alaskan wilderness itself. Marcus Davidson's last known photograph was taken at 8:12 a.m. on a cold July morning in Denali National Park. The jagged profile of Mount Foraker shadowed behind his tent, his face all confidence and sunburned resolve. He was 34 years old, a seasoned backpacker and ultra-marathoner out of Phoenix, Arizona, the kind of man who quoted Emerson on his Instagram bio and included his highest elevation climbed next to his job at a solar energy company. Friends called Marcus disciplined, ambitious, but also stubborn. The moment he first set foot in Alaska, he is said to have promised his followers a true solo traverse of the Denali backcountry. No guides, all compass work, homemade dehydrated meals, a satellite beacon for emergencies only, and a camera mounted to chronicle each crucial step. For Marcus, this journey was not just adventure, it was a declaration. To conquer your fears, you must walk into them alone. He arrived in Anchorage on July 2nd, upbeat and chatty if more sleep-deprived than he let on. His mother, Susan, called twice that first weekend. He replied with canned texts from the shuttle van. "Don't worry, Mom. Alaska is even more beautiful than they say. I could stay out here forever." The last person to see him in town was a grocery store cashier who remembered the sunburned hiker with the overstuffed backpack and camera rig who bought 3 bottles of water, a pack of jerky, and a pencil for his field notes. His plan, according to the itinerary left with his friend Alan Jenkins, was a 6-day hike from the Wonder Lake trailhead northward, looping toward a lesser-marked glacier valley seldom visited except by the most experienced. "The only way to feel alive," Marcus had said, "is to go places nobody else dares to go." Day 1 was routine, photographs and footprints on Wonder Lake Trail. Verified by 2 families on holiday from Seattle. Mile 12, Marcus resting by a waterfall, helping a pair of children identify cloudberry plants. That same afternoon, he signed the backcountry log at Sable Pass. All clear. No bears, weather holding, spirits even higher. His penmanship, always precise, hinted at anticipation. Rangers later noted the entry time, 2:36 p.m., and that his was the only solo name that day. On the 3rd morning, Marcus's route deviated from the park-advised map. According to geotagged photos, he continued past Coyote Creek, angling east instead of following the river north. He was still posting short clips from his phone, battery permitting, describing rain-soaked socks and the humbling silence of the tundra. The angle of the sun in later images suggests he reached the mouth of the glacier valley just after midnight. The sky at that latitude never goes fully dark in July. In the background of his last video, the landscape is all gold and silver, but a blurry distortion creeps into the left edge of the frame. A washed-out smudge that Marcus never comments on. When he failed to check in by satellite on the 5th day, his agreed-upon schedule with Alan, his disappearance triggered the first wave of anxiety. At first, nobody panicked. Marcus was known to stretch plans, but 24 more hours passed with only silence. On July 9th, Denali Rangers launched a search. The weather had started to turn, the kind of cold wind that one searcher called a warning straight from the Arctic itself. Rangers and volunteers combed the marked trails, then pressed deeper into the valley where Marcus's GPS had last pinged. They found his camp 3 days later on the edge of a gravel outwash, miles from the nearest human traffic. The camp was undisturbed. His tent was perfectly erected, his gas canister half-used, maps weighted by a single stone on one corner of the sleeping pad. Compass, stove, extra socks, his cherished field journal, all intact. Only Marcus's boots were missing. There were no obvious signs of struggle. A ranger found his phone on airplane mode tucked into a sealed plastic bag. Local rules for water protection. What stopped every searcher cold, however, was the lack of tracks. In the patchy silt around the tent, Marcus's own footprints were clear, leading from the tent to the nearby stream and back to the tent. But there were no further footprints moving out into the surrounding brush or up towards the glacier. No sign he had left under duress, nor that a bear or animal dragged him away. The area had seen a cold snap, but no significant snow, and the silt should have captured hours-old movement. His boots were never located. Wildlife cameras in the area checked after his disappearance showed nothing except caribou herds, and one night the distant flash of some animal's eyes. But in the final true time-stamped photo Marcus sent to his cloud account, taken sometime after midnight, observers noticed a strange vertical smear in the background. A translucent gray shape against the rocks, almost as if something had moved quickly through the frame as the shutter went off. The angle made the object difficult to identify. Was it a bear standing upright, a tree moving in wind? Digital analysts could not agree. The most perplexing detail surfaced later after Alan Jenkins gained access to Marcus's GPS watch data. The last recorded coordinates from early morning showed a sudden and impossible burst of eastward movement, over a mile in under 3 minutes, terrain that would have required ropes and technical climbing for the most seasoned expert. The line zigzags, then cuts off with a flat line where the device powers down. Electrical failure? Glitch caused by solar interference? The manufacturer could not replicate the error in tests, and no other devices in Denali recorded similar anomalies that week. Rangers cataloged the evidence, marked Marcus as missing, and posted be-on-the-lookout notices statewide. Although the initial search covered more than 50 square miles, no additional clues were found. Helicopters flew gridded patterns along the valley, and canine teams swept the nearby woods, but the team never found any sign of fallen clothing, bright rescue tape, or spent flares. The consensus around campfires in the search base was bleak. People disappear in Alaska every year, but never like this. Rumors circulated quickly, as they always do in the wild. The park's backcountry forums filled with speculation. Did Marcus fall down an unseen crevasse and get covered by fresh rock? Did he stage his own getaway, scrubbing away his tracks to escape some unknown threat or unfinished business? Was he taken by a rare animal, perhaps a wolf pack or a grizzly, without leaving blood or struggle? Or, as some in the digital community whispered, was he victim to one of the infamous missing time phenomena recounted occasionally by seasoned Alaskans? Odd gaps in memory, time skips, travelers losing hours or days with no explanation? Marcus's family declined interviews with major media, but his mother posted a public letter to the r/Alaska Outdoors subreddit. Marcus was careful, smart, and respected wild places more than anyone I know. He found peace in the places most people found terrifying. If you were the last person to speak to him, if you saw anything unusual, no matter how small, please let us know. We just want answers. The people who'd seen him at Wonder Lake quietly volunteered again for subsequent search attempts. Each time the weather fought them, and each time the camp they found was just as he'd left it. Only the wildlife seemed to reclaim the place. Wolf prints, bear scat, the scatter of birds' nests in the brush. On one later survey, Alan left a note weighed by a carabiner in case Marcus ever returned. "You have not been forgotten." He also took a photograph of the area matching Marcus's final selfie, posting it next to the original for his followers. The only difference is the sky, overcast now. and the world empty of its smiling, vanished hiker. The debate over Marcus Davidson's case has never settled. On the first anniversary of his disappearance, intrepid admirers and internet sleuths organized a digital Marcus map, combining every sighting, clue, and theory, from pragmatic to the fantastic. Missing 411 investigators and wilderness bloggers cited his story and warnings about Alaska's unique ability to erase a person swiftly and without explanation. Some searchers and rangers still return to the valley when their routes intersect Denali, driven less by hope of rescue than the compulsion to honor the lost. They speak of the cold that seems to descend suddenly at the foot of the glacier. They mention the uncanny quiet at Marcus's last known camp, and the feeling, unspoken but nearly universal, that in Alaska sometimes the wilds keep their own. What remains are questions, digital breadcrumbs, and a void where a living person used to walk. Some suggest the final image on his cloud, filtered, saturated with that strange vertical smudge, was only a camera fault. Others claim it is proof of the unknown, an enduring enigma carved into the unyielding tundra. Marcus Davidson, the overconfident hiker, walked into a landscape known for not yielding its mysteries, and somewhere between his last words and that empty camp became one of its unsolved disappearances. To this day, his tent, retrieved by his family and preserved quietly, remains sealed in storage, its fabric still dusted with fine Alaskan silt, a mute artifact left behind by a man whose footprints simply stopped. And in a way, that uncertainty is the most haunting part, for what happened to Marcus could, under the right mix of courage and misfortune, happen to anyone who sets foot in the wild heart of Alaska, daring to go just a little further than the world can follow. When wildlife photographer Jennifer Kowalski from Milwaukee packed her bags for a month-long Alaska expedition in September 2023, she had no idea she was walking into a mystery that would consume 3 generations of her family. At 41, Jennifer had built a reputation capturing the most elusive moments in nature. Wolves hunting under the full moon, eagles diving through morning mist, the precise instant when lightning illuminates a storm cloud. Her work had graced the covers of National Geographic and Outdoor Life, but it was her obsession with the aurora borealis that finally drew her to the last frontier. Jennifer's fascination with the northern lights began in childhood, sparked by a documentary her grandmother had shown her about the indigenous peoples of Alaska and their legends surrounding the dancing sky spirits. She had spent years photographing aurora displays in Montana, Wyoming, and northern Canada. But Alaska represented the Holy Grail, the place where the lights burned brightest and most unpredictably. Her plan was ambitious, a solo month-long expedition during peak aurora season, traveling between remote locations far from any light pollution, using specialized long-exposure equipment to capture images no one had achieved before. Her husband David initially opposed the trip. Jennifer had a history of pushing boundaries, once spending 3 weeks alone in Yellowstone tracking a particular wolf pack, another time camping for 10 days in a Montana blizzard to photograph a rare atmospheric phenomenon. But Alaska was different. The distances were vast, the weather unpredictable, and the isolation complete. Jennifer assured him she would check in via satellite phone every 48 hours and carry 2 emergency beacons. She had researched every aspect of the journey, from weather patterns to wildlife migration routes, and had even hired a local guide for the most remote segments. On September 12th, Jennifer flew into Fairbanks with 4 cases of camera equipment, cold weather gear rated for -40 degrees, and a specially modified truck equipped with a rooftop observation platform. Her first week was productive. She captured stunning images near Chena Hot Springs and sent David photographs of the aurora that were unlike anything in her portfolio. The lights that week were particularly active, stretching across the entire sky in sheets of green and purple that she described as breathing. Her first scheduled check-in came right on schedule. Her voice was excited but professional as she described the clarity of the northern sky and her plans to head further north toward the Dalton Highway. She mentioned that the aurora forecasts predicted an unusual solar storm pattern that could produce once-in-a-decade displays. Jennifer had decided to extend her northern route to take advantage of the conditions. By September 20th, Jennifer had established a base camp near Coldfoot, a tiny settlement along the Dalton Highway that served as a refueling stop for truckers heading to the North Slope oil fields. The few residents who met her remembered her enthusiasm and her impressive camera setup, thousands of dollars worth of equipment that she handled with the care of a master craftsman. She spent 2 nights at the local camp store, showing other travelers her initial photographs and explaining her techniques for capturing the aurora's movement. Her next communication came on September 23rd, but something had changed. Jennifer's voice on the satellite phone was strained, almost breathless. She told David that she was seeing unusual formations in the aurora displays, patterns that did not match any scientific descriptions she had studied. She mentioned that the lights seemed to respond to her presence, becoming more active when she set up her cameras and dimming when she moved away. David later described feeling uneasy about the call, noting that Jennifer sounded simultaneously excited and fearful, as if she had discovered something she could not quite explain. That was the last time anyone heard from Jennifer Kowalski. When she failed to make her scheduled check-in on September 25th, David immediately contacted Alaska State Troopers. The search began within hours, focused on the area around Coldfoot where she was last known to be camping. The terrain north of the Arctic Circle is unforgiving. Rolling tundra broken by deep ravines, countless small lakes, and weather that can change from clear skies to whiteout conditions in minutes. Search teams found Jennifer's truck on September 28th, parked on a rarely used access road about 15 miles northeast of Coldfoot. The vehicle was unlocked with no signs of struggle or mechanical problems. Her camping gear was still inside, along with most of her cold weather clothing. What troubled the searchers most was that her primary camera equipment was missing, thousands of dollars worth of specialized gear that Jennifer would never leave behind voluntarily. The discovery that stopped the search team in its tracks came 2 miles from the truck. Jennifer's main camera, a high-end digital model worth more than most people's cars, was found partially buried in the soft tundra, as if it had been placed there deliberately. The camera was undamaged and still contained its memory card. When investigators reviewed the images, they found hundreds of aurora photographs, each more spectacular than the last. But it was the final series of photographs that defied explanation. The last 47 images on Jennifer's camera showed the aurora borealis in formations that atmospheric scientists insisted were impossible. Instead of the typical curtain-like displays or spiral patterns, the lights formed distinct geometric shapes, perfect triangles, interlocking hexagons, and complex mathematical patterns that seemed to pulse with intentional rhythm. More disturbing were the final dozen photographs, which appeared to show humanoid silhouettes. Within the aurora itself, dark figures that seemed to move independently of the light patterns surrounding them. Digital analysis by the FBI's technical team confirmed that the images had not been manipulated. The metadata showed they were taken over a 6-hour period on the night of September 24th, with timestamps indicating Jennifer had been photographing continuously from 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. The progression of images suggested she had been moving steadily north across the tundra, following the aurora displays as they shifted across the sky. The most haunting discovery came from the camera's GPS data. The coordinates showed Jennifer had traveled in a perfectly straight line for over 8 miles across terrain that would have been nearly impossible to navigate in darkness, even with night vision equipment. The line of travel led directly toward a series of small lakes that were frozen solid despite the early season date. Local Inupiat elders consulted by the search team pointed out that the lakes Jennifer approached were traditionally considered taboo, places where their ancestors believed the spirits of the aurora came to rest during the day. Ground searches in the area revealed Jennifer's footprints, clearly identifiable from the distinctive tread pattern of her photography boots. The tracks began at her truck and followed the same northward path indicated by her camera's GPS data. But like so many Alaska disappearance cases, the footprints simply ended. At the shore of the largest lake, Jennifer's tracks approached the ice, then vanished completely. There were no signs of the ice breaking, no evidence she had fallen through, and no tracks leading away in any direction. Dive teams eventually searched the lake after the ice thickened, but found no trace of Jennifer or her missing equipment. The lake bottom was surprisingly deep and clear, with visibility extending far enough that searchers could see there was nothing there to find. The underwater search did reveal one peculiarity: a perfect circle on the lake bottom where no vegetation grew, approximately 50 feet in diameter, as if the lake bed had been burned or treated with some kind of chemical. Jennifer's family hired private investigators who spent months following up on every lead. They interviewed truckers who traveled the Dalton Highway, contacted amateur aurora photographers who might have been in the area, and even consulted with researchers studying electromagnetic phenomena in the Arctic. None of the investigations yielded any concrete answers. The case attracted attention from paranormal researchers and UFO investigators, who pointed to the unusual aurora formations in Jennifer's final photographs as evidence of extraterrestrial contact. Mainstream scientists dismissed these theories but could not provide alternative explanations for the geometric light patterns or the humanoid silhouettes captured in her images. More troubling were the reports that began surfacing from other aurora photographers. Multiple individuals contacted authorities claiming they had experienced similar phenomena: aurora displays that seemed to respond to their presence, geometric patterns that appeared nowhere in scientific literature, and an overwhelming compulsion to follow the lights further north than they had planned. 2 photographers reported losing several hours of memory during their aurora photography sessions, finding themselves miles from their intended locations with no recollection of how they had gotten there. The scientific community remained divided on Jennifer's photographs. Some atmospheric physicists suggested the unusual formations could be explained by rare magnetic field interactions during the solar storm period. Others pointed out that aurora displays are constantly photographed by automated cameras across Alaska, and none had ever recorded similar geometric patterns. The humanoid silhouettes were generally dismissed as pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces and figures in random patterns. David Kowalski disagreed. He spent the first anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance in Alaska, retracing her route and interviewing anyone who might have information. He described feeling an inexplicable pull toward the north during his time there, and reported that the aurora displays he witnessed seemed to move with unusual purpose and intelligence. He eventually established a foundation offering rewards for any information about Jennifer's fate. But the leads have gradually dried up. Jennifer's camera, with its impossible final images, remains in evidence storage with Alaska State Troopers. Occasionally, researchers request access to study the photographs, but none have provided satisfactory explanations for what Jennifer captured during her final hours. The images have been shared in academic papers about atmospheric phenomena, always with careful disclaimers about their unexplained nature. Local guides in the Coldfoot area now tell Jennifer's story to tourists, usually as a cautionary tale about respecting the power of the Alaskan wilderness. But some of the older guides, particularly those with indigenous heritage, tell a different version of the story. They speak of the aurora as living entities, ancient spirits that occasionally call to humans with the right sensitivity to perceive them. In their telling, Jennifer did not disappear. She was chosen, selected by forces that exist beyond human understanding to join something larger than herself. Whether viewed through the lens of science or spirituality, Jennifer Kowalski's disappearance remains one of Alaska's most perplexing cases. Her final photographs serve as the only evidence of her last hours, cryptic images that raise more questions than they answer. Somewhere in the vast expanse of northern Alaska, beyond the reach of search teams and satellite phones, lies the answer to what happened when an accomplished photographer followed the dancing lights too far into the darkness. Until that answer is found, Jennifer's story serves as a reminder that Alaska holds mysteries that may be beyond human comprehension, and that some obsessions carry a price that cannot be calculated until it is too late to pay. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez had led dozens of archaeological expeditions across the Americas, but the 3-month dig site in northern Alaska would challenge everything she thought she knew about human history. At 43, she was considered one of the foremost experts on pre-Columbian Arctic cultures, with a PhD from Stanford and 20 years of fieldwork that had taken her from the Canadian tundra to the remote islands of the Bering Sea. Her reputation for meticulous documentation and scientific rigor had earned her a prestigious National Science Foundation grant to investigate what satellite imagery suggested might be the oldest human settlement ever discovered in North America. The site was located in the Brooks Range, approximately 200 miles north of Fairbanks, accessible only by helicopter during the brief summer season. Initial ground-penetrating radar surveys had revealed structures buried beneath the permafrost that appeared to predate known indigenous settlements by thousands of years. If the preliminary data was correct, the discovery could rewrite the entire timeline of human migration to the Americas. Elizabeth assembled a carefully chosen team of 5 specialists for the expedition. Dr. James Chen, a soil analyst from UC Berkeley whose expertise in dating organic materials was unparalleled. Sarah Blackwood, a graduate student in anthropology from Harvard who had spent 2 summers working Arctic sites in Siberia. Tommy Yazzie, a Navajo archaeologist and survival expert whose knowledge of traditional indigenous technologies was essential for interpreting any artifacts they might discover. Finally, Dr. Andreas Petrov, a geologist from the University of Alaska, whose understanding of permafrost dynamics would be crucial for excavation planning. The team established their base camp on June 15, 2023, setting up a sophisticated research station complete with satellite communications, portable laboratory equipment, and emergency supplies rated for 3 months of independence. The dig site was situated on a raised plateau overlooking the Koyukuk River, with helicopter landing clearings marked for weekly supply drops and emergency evacuation if needed. The first month progressed exactly as planned, with careful excavation revealing what appeared to be extremely ancient stone tools and carved bone fragments. Elizabeth's daily reports to the National Science Foundation described findings that were revolutionary but requiring extensive verification. The artifacts showed craftsmanship techniques that did not match any known Arctic cultures, with tool designs that seemed to blend elements from various worldwide traditions in ways that should not have been possible given the accepted timeline of human migration. By mid-July, the team's discoveries had become increasingly puzzling. They uncovered structures built from precisely fitted stone blocks, construction methods that required engineering knowledge supposedly unknown to prehistoric Arctic peoples. More disturbing were the carved symbols found on many artifacts, intricate geometric patterns that seemed to represent mathematical concepts far more advanced than anything associated with early human settlements in the region. Elizabeth's communications with the outside world began to take on an excited but increasingly confused tone. Her July 20th satellite phone call to her department head at Columbia University lasted over an hour, during which she described findings that challenge fundamental assumptions about the development of human civilization. She mentioned discovering what appeared to be astronomical calculation tools and metallurgical evidence suggesting these ancient peoples had access to techniques not seen elsewhere until thousands of years later. The team's final scheduled communication came on August 3rd. Elizabeth's voice during that satellite call was strained and rapid, as if she was struggling to contain her excitement while simultaneously fighting growing confusion. She reported that the team had uncovered what appeared to be a burial chamber containing artifacts that defied explanation. Tools made from materials that should not have existed in prehistoric Alaska, including what appeared to be refined metals and worked stones that exhibited properties their portable testing equipment could not identify. More troubling was Elizabeth's description of the site's effect on the team members. She mentioned that everyone was experiencing unusually vivid dreams, always featuring the same imagery. Vast cities built into mountainsides, complex ceremonies conducted by figures in elaborate masks, and a recurring sense that they were being watched by ancient eyes. Tamayasu had become convinced that the site was sacred ground that should not be disturbed, while Dr. Chen had begun reporting equipment malfunctions that consistently showed impossible dates when carbon testing organic materials from the deepest excavation levels. When the team failed to make their scheduled August 10th communication, the National Science Foundation contacted their helicopter transport service to conduct a welfare check. The pilot found the base camp on August 12th, but what he discovered there defied explanation. The camp appeared to have been abandoned in haste, with expensive equipment left running and personal belongings scattered as if the team had departed suddenly in the middle of their daily activities. The excavation site itself was the most puzzling aspect of the discovery. The careful archaeological grid that Elizabeth's team had established was gone, replaced by a circular excavation that descended much deeper than any previous dig had reached. The walls of this new excavation were perfectly smooth as if cut by precision machinery, and the geometric spiral pattern carved into the walls matched the symbols found on the artifacts the team had described in their reports. Alaska State troopers launched an immediate search and rescue operation, but found no trace of the 5 team members. Their personal equipment was cataloged and showed no signs of struggle or emergency. Individual tents contained belongings laid out as if their owners had simply stepped away temporarily. Dr. Martinez's field journals were found open to entries describing increasingly impossible discoveries, with her handwriting becoming more erratic as the entries progressed. The final journal entry, dated August 9th, described the team's decision to excavate deeper into what Elizabeth called the central chamber. She wrote about discovering carved stone panels that seemed to depict star maps showing constellations in positions that would not occur for thousands of years. More disturbing was her description of finding what appeared to be preserved organic materials that their carbon dating equipment insisted were simultaneously ancient beyond measurement and impossibly fresh. Most unsettling was Elizabeth's final written observation. "The site is not what we thought. We are not the first to find this place. The previous researchers never left. Tonight we understand why." Search teams from the Alaska Rescue Coordination Center spent 3 weeks combing the area around the dig site, using helicopters, ground teams, and specialized equipment designed to locate people in wilderness conditions. Despite covering over 500 square miles of territory, no trace of the missing researchers was ever found. The harsh Arctic environment could account for bodies disappearing, but not the complete absence of any evidence that 5 people had walked away from their camp. The National Science Foundation sealed the dig site and classified all materials related to the expedition. Official reports described the disappearance as likely due to catastrophic weather events or wildlife encounters. But internal documents obtained years later through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that investigators found the site conditions inexplicable. The smooth excavation walls showed no tool marks consistent with any known digging equipment, and the geometric patterns carved into the stone required precision that the team's tools could not have achieved. More disturbing were the artifacts recovered from the sealed site. Items that Elizabeth's team had described in their reports were found arranged in complex patterns around the central excavation, positioned in ways that seemed to represent star charts and mathematical equations. When examined by experts, these arrangements demonstrated knowledge of advanced astronomical phenomena that would not be discovered by mainstream science for several more decades. Independent researchers who later investigated the case discovered that the Brooks Range location had been the subject of indigenous warnings for generations. Local Gwich'in elders spoke of the area as a place where time behaved differently, where ancient spirits still walked, and where people who disturbed certain locations might find themselves walking between worlds. These oral traditions, dismissed by earlier scientific expeditions, described phenomena remarkably similar to what Elizabeth's team had reported in their final communications. The families of the missing researchers eventually established a private foundation offering rewards for information about their fate, but no credible leads ever emerged. The dig site remains under federal protection, officially closed due to hazardous geological conditions, though satellite imagery shows that the excavation continues to expand on its own, following the same geometric patterns that the research team had documented. Tamiyazi's family, drawing on Navajo traditions about sacred sites and spiritual boundaries, conducted their own ceremony at the location a year after his disappearance. The medicine man who led the ceremony later described sensing the presence of people existing between the time that was and the time that will be, trapped in a location where different eras intersected. Today, the case of Dr. Elizabeth Martinez and her research team serves as a cautionary tale within the archaeological community about the dangers of Arctic fieldwork, though the official narrative focuses on environmental hazards rather than the inexplicable evidence found at the site. The artifacts recovered from the dig remain in federal storage, studied by researchers who are required to sign non-disclosure agreements about their findings. The mystery of what happened to 5 experienced scientists at a remote dig site in northern Alaska continues to challenge both scientific understanding and traditional explanations of disappearance in the wilderness. Whether they encountered some unknown natural phenomenon, stumbled upon evidence of civilizations that official history cannot accommodate, or walked into something that exists beyond the boundaries of normal time and space, their fate remains one of Alaska's most perplexing unsolved cases. Their final discovery, that the ancient sites seem to exist simultaneously in multiple time periods, suggests that some mysteries in Alaska may be too vast and too dangerous for human understanding, and that the last frontier holds secrets that are better left buried beneath the permafrost where they have waited for thousands of years. Tyler Rodriguez, better known to his 2.3 million subscribers as Alaska Beast, had built his entire YouTube channel around extreme wilderness challenges, but his final video series would become the most watched disappearance documentary on the platform. At 29, Tyler embodied the new generation of extreme content creators. Fearless, tech-savvy, and driven by an insatiable need to push boundaries for increasingly demanding audiences. His channel featured him surviving in remote locations across North America, from Death Valley heat waves to Canadian blizzards, always filming himself with multiple cameras to capture every moment of struggle and triumph. Tyler grew up in Los Angeles, the son of a movie studio grip and a yoga instructor, surrounded by the entertainment industry's obsession with spectacle and audience engagement. After dropping out of film school, he launched his YouTube channel with a simple premise: He would survive in the world's most dangerous environments using minimal equipment while documenting every moment. His early videos showed genuine survival skills learned from military consultants and wilderness experts. But as his subscriber count grew, so did the pressure to create increasingly extreme content. By 2024, Tyler's channel was generating substantial revenue through sponsorships, merchandise, and YouTube's monetization program. He lived comfortably in a Marina del Rey apartment filled with outdoor gear and editing equipment, but his content had become repetitive. Audience retention metrics showed declining interest in his usual desert and mountain survival videos. Tyler needed something bigger, more dangerous, more remote than anything he had attempted before. Alaska represented the ultimate challenge, vast, unforgiving, and mysterious enough to capture his audience's imagination. His plan was ambitious even by his standards, a 30-day solo survival challenge in one of Alaska's most remote wilderness areas, armed only with basic tools and multiple cameras to document every aspect of the experience. Tyler spent months researching locations, eventually selecting a region in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park, hundreds of miles from the nearest road or settlement. The area was known for unpredictable weather, dangerous wildlife, and terrain that challenged even experienced mountaineers. Tyler's promotional campaign for the series generated massive anticipation among his subscribers. He posted daily preparation videos showing his gear selection, survival training, and physical conditioning regimen. The comment sections filled with both encouragement and warnings from viewers, including several Alaskans who urged him to reconsider the location's dangers. Tyler's response was characteristically confident. "Fear is just excitement without breath. Alaska Beast doesn't run from challenges, we run toward them." He arrived in Alaska on September 5, 2024, flying into Anchorage with 6 waterproof camera cases and enough survival gear to sustain him for the planned 30 days. His final civilization video, filmed at Ted Stevens International Airport, showed Tyler's typical bravado mixed with genuine nervous excitement. He promised his audience the most extreme survival content ever created, joking that he might emerge from the wilderness with a full beard and a dozen new scars to show off. The helicopter drop on September 8th marked the beginning of Tyler's documentation. His first video, uploaded via satellite internet connection, showed him establishing base camp in a valley surrounded by glaciated peaks. The footage demonstrated his usual professional quality, multiple camera angles, crisp audio commentary, and the kind of scenic establishing shots that had made his channel famous. Tyler appeared confident and well-prepared, describing his planned route and daily survival goals with the enthusiasm that had attracted millions of followers. For the first week, Tyler's daily uploads maintained his typical format. He built shelter, foraged for edible plants, attempted to catch fish, and provided educational commentary about wilderness survival techniques. The videos showed him dealing with weather challenges, equipment issues, and the psychological stress of complete isolation. His subscriber engagement remained high, with comments praising his skills and encouraging him to push further into the wilderness. The first signs of trouble appeared in his September 16th upload. Tyler's usual confident demeanor seemed strained, and he mentioned experiencing weird dreams and feeling like he was being watched. He attributed the sensation to isolation stress and the hypervigilance necessary for wilderness survival, but careful viewers noticed subtle changes in his behavior. He spoke more rapidly, frequently glanced over his shoulder, and seemed to forget details he had mentioned in previous videos. By September 20th, Tyler's content had taken a decidedly different tone. His videos became longer and less structured, filled with rambling commentary about strange sounds he heard at night and unusual animal behavior in the area. He claimed that wolves were following him, staying just outside his camera range but making their presence known through howling and movement in the peripheral brush. Tyler began setting up multiple cameras around his sleeping area, hoping to capture evidence of the coordination he insisted the local wildlife was displaying. The September 23rd video marked a dramatic shift in Tyler's psychological state. The footage showed him in an obviously agitated condition, describing how his campfire had been deliberately scattered during the night by something that left no tracks. He claimed that his food cache had been disturbed in ways that suggested intelligent manipulation rather than animal scavenging. Most disturbing was his insistence that they were learning his routines, adapting their behavior to stay ahead of his camera coverage. Tyler's final coherent upload came on September 26th. The 18-minute video showed him breaking down his established camp and moving to what he called a more defensible position higher up the valley. His commentary was increasingly paranoid, describing a coordinated effort by local wildlife to drive him from the area. He claimed that ravens were serving as scouts, bears were herding him toward specific locations, and even the terrain itself seemed to shift when he was not directly observing it. The video that would become internet legend was uploaded automatically on September 28th, triggered by Tyler's camera system's emergency protocol when he failed to manually upload for 48 hours. The footage, filmed with a handheld camera, showed Tyler running through dense forest in obvious panic. His breathing was labored, and his usual articulate commentary had devolved into fragments of desperate observation. "They're coordinating," he gasped between breaths. "Watch the trees. Watch the shadows. They're hurting me." The final minutes of footage showed Tyler reaching a rocky outcropping where he attempted to make a stand. He set up his camera to film while he gathered stones as makeshift weapons, all while providing running commentary about the Watchers, who were closing in from all directions. The video ended abruptly with Tyler screaming and the camera falling to capture only sky and treetops before the battery died. Search and rescue operations began immediately when Tyler's emergency beacon activated automatically. The signal led rescuers to his final campsite on the exposed ridge approximately 15 miles from his planned route. What they found defied easy explanation. Tyler's final camp showed signs of hasty abandonment, with expensive camera equipment scattered across a wide area as if thrown or dropped during a desperate retreat. Most puzzling was the drone footage captured by the search team. Tyler's final campsite was located in the center of what appeared to be a perfect circle of disturbed vegetation, approximately 200 yards in diameter. Trees within the circle showed signs of damage at consistent heights, as if something large had moved through the area in systematic patterns. Wildlife biologists consulted during the search could not explain the uniform nature of the disturbance or identify what might have caused such extensive but organized damage. The search expanded to cover over 300 square miles using helicopters, ground teams, and specialized tracking dogs. Despite the massive effort, no trace of Tyler Rodriguez was ever found. His emergency beacon was discovered still functioning on the ridge where his final camp had been established. But Tyler himself had vanished completely. The beacon's GPS log showed impossible movement patterns in its final hours, rapid displacement across terrain that would require vehicles or aircraft to traverse. Tyler's YouTube channel became the center of intense scrutiny as investigators and amateur detectives analyzed every frame of his final videos. Digital forensics experts examined the footage for evidence of staging or manipulation, but found nothing to suggest the videos were anything other than genuine documentation of Tyler's deteriorating mental state and final disappearance. More disturbing were the discoveries made by enhanced audio analysis of Tyler's final videos. When the background noise was filtered and amplified, investigators found sounds that seemed to support Tyler's claims about coordinated wildlife behavior. Multiple animal calls appeared to respond to each other in patterns that suggested communication rather than random vocalizations. Even more unsettling were what appeared to be mechanical sounds, rhythmic clicking and humming that had no obvious natural source. The case attracted attention from paranormal researchers, cryptozoologists, and conspiracy theorists, who pointed to Tyler's documentation as evidence of unknown phenomena in Alaska's wilderness. Mainstream scientists dismissed these interpretations, attributing Tyler's experiences to isolation psychosis and environmental stress. However, several wildlife biologists acknowledged that the coordinated animal behavior Tyler described, while extremely unusual, was not entirely outside the realm of possibility. Tyler's family established a foundation offering substantial rewards for information about his fate, but no credible leads ever emerged. The YouTube channel remained active, generating revenue from the millions of views his final videos continued to attract. His disappearance sparked countless reaction videos, analysis channels, and documentary series, making Alaska Beast more famous in death than he had ever been in life. The Wrangell St. Elias region where Tyler disappeared has since become a pilgrimage site for his fans and extreme content creators attempting to recreate his journey. Park rangers report increased rescue calls from YouTubers and social media influencers who underestimate the area's dangers while trying to capitalize on Tyler's legend. Several have been evacuated after experiencing symptoms similar to those Tyler documented: paranoia, insomnia, and reports of unusual wildlife behavior. Today, Tyler Rodriguez's final video series serves as both entertainment and cautionary tale about the dangers of extreme content creation. His disappearance highlights the thin line between legitimate wilderness survival and reckless endangerment, while raising uncomfortable questions about audience responsibility when content creators risk their lives for views and engagement. The mystery of what happened to Alaska Beast during his final hours in the Alaskan wilderness remains unsolved. Whether he succumbed to environmental factors, experienced a complete psychological breakdown, or encountered something that exists beyond current scientific understanding, his fate serves as a stark reminder that Alaska's vast wilderness holds dangers that no amount of preparation or camera equipment can overcome. In the end, the last frontier claimed another victim, leaving behind only digital fragments of a man who pushed too far into places where humans were never meant to venture alone. The Brennan family reunion was supposed to heal old wounds and bring together 4 generations scattered across America. But their chartered fishing trip near the Aleutian Islands would create a mystery that haunts Alaska to this day. The reunion had been 3 years in the planning, organized by matriarch Eleanor Brennan, a 78-year-old retired librarian from Portland, Oregon, who was determined to gather her sprawling family before age, and distance made such reunions impossible. The Brennan clan had spread across the continent over the decades. Eleanor's 3 children had settled in different states after college: daughter Margaret in Seattle working as a marine biologist, son Patrick in Denver running a construction business, and youngest son Thomas teaching high school in Atlanta. Each had married and raised their own children, creating a network of 12 family members who rarely saw each other except at weddings and funerals. Eleanor's vision was simple: 1 week together in Alaska, sharing the kind of adventure that would create lasting memories and bridge the gaps that time and geography had created. The family's choice of Alaska was influenced by Margaret's expertise in marine ecosystems and her connections in the fishing industry. She arranged for the charter of a 42-foot fishing vessel, the Kodiak Dream, captained by a respected local operator named Victor Peterson. Victor had been running fishing charters in Alaskan waters for over 20 years, with an impeccable safety record and intimate knowledge of the waters around the Aleutian Islands. The plan was to spend 5 days fishing for halibut and salmon while enjoying the spectacular scenery of one of the world's most remote maritime regions. The family gathered in Anchorage on July 18, 2024, representing 4 generations of Brennans. Eleanor, despite her age, showed remarkable energy and enthusiasm for the adventure. Her children, Margaret at 51, Patrick at 48, and Thomas at 45, each brought their own families. Margaret's twin daughters, both marine science graduate students, were excited to see their grandmother's adventurous spirit firsthand. Patrick brought his wife and teenage son, while Thomas was accompanied by his husband and their 2 adopted children, ages 8 and 10. The group flew to Dutch Harbor on July 20th, where they met Captain Peterson and toured the Kodiak Dream. The vessel was well maintained and properly equipped for extended offshore fishing, with sleeping quarters for 12 passengers, modern navigation equipment, and all required safety gear including emergency beacons and life rafts. Victor conducted a thorough safety briefing, explaining emergency procedures and weather protocols with the kind of professional competence that reassured even the most nervous family members. The first 2 days of the trip exceeded everyone's expectations. The weather was unusually calm for the notoriously rough waters around the Aleutian Islands, and the fishing was exceptional. Family members who had not spoken in months found themselves working together to land massive halibut, while the children were delighted by sightings of whales, sea otters, and countless seabirds. Eleanor proved to be a surprisingly skilled angler, catching the largest fish of the first day and earning good-natured teasing from her grandchildren about beginner's luck. On the evening of July 22nd, the Kodiak Dream was anchored in a protected cove on the south side of Unalaska Island, about 40 miles from Dutch Harbor. The family had just finished a dinner of freshly caught salmon prepared by Thomas, who had trained as a chef before becoming a teacher. Captain Peterson's log, recovered later, indicated calm seas, clear skies, and ideal conditions for the next day's fishing. The final entry, made at 9:30 p.m., noted that all 12 passengers were accounted for and preparing for bed after what he described as one of the most successful family trips I've ever guided. The Coast Guard received the Kodiak Dream's automatic distress signal at 3:47 a.m. on July 23rd. The signal, transmitted by the vessel's emergency position indicating radio beacon, indicated that the boat was approximately 15 miles northeast of its last known position and traveling at an impossible speed of over 60 knots. Coast Guard radar operators initially dismissed the reading as a equipment malfunction, since no vessel of the Kodiak Dream's size and configuration could maintain such velocity in open ocean conditions. When repeated attempts to raise Captain Peterson on the radio failed, the Coast Guard dispatched a helicopter from Dutch Harbor to investigate. The crew found the Kodiak Dream at 6:15 a.m., drifting in calm waters with its engines running at idle speed and its navigation lights still functioning. From the air, the vessel appeared completely normal, but radio contact attempts continued to fail. The helicopter crew reported seeing no signs of life on deck, though the boat's configuration made it impossible to see into the wheelhouse or cabin areas from above. Coast Guard cutter Mellon reached the Kodiak Dream at 8:30 a.m. and immediately dispatched a boarding party. What they found aboard the empty vessel defied every expectation and protocol they had trained for. The boat was in perfect condition, showing no signs of distress, damage, or struggle. The engines were running normally, all navigation equipment was functioning, and the vessel's systems indicated no mechanical problems whatsoever. Most puzzling was the condition of the passengers' belongings. Every personal item remained exactly where it should be. Clothes neatly folded in sleeping quarters, glasses and books placed carefully on bedside tables, cameras and fishing equipment stored in proper locations. The galley showed evidence of preparation for breakfast, with coffee measured into the machine and bread laid out for toasting. Nothing suggested hasty departure or emergency evacuation. However, all 13 life jackets were missing from their storage compartments, despite regulations requiring them to remain aboard unless actively worn. The life rafts remained in place and had not been deployed, but their inspection logs showed they had been accessed sometime during the night. More disturbing was the discovery that the boat's emergency radio had been switched to a frequency not used by any known maritime service, and its GPS system showed a navigation track that formed a perfect geometric pattern, a series of interlocking circles covering approximately 200 square miles of ocean. The Coast Guard's investigation revealed that the Kodiak Dream had traveled this geometric pattern between midnight and 3:47 a.m., maintaining precise courses and speeds that would require constant manual navigation adjustments. The pattern was too complex and exact to be the result of autopilot malfunction or drift, yet no human operator could have maintained such precision while simultaneously managing 12 passengers in what must have been increasingly confused circumstances. Marine salvage experts brought aboard to examine the vessel found evidence that someone had made extensive modifications to the boat's navigation systems during the final hours. Additional equipment had been connected to the GPS and radar systems using connections that required advanced technical knowledge. The modifications appeared designed to track and record specific oceanographic data, but the purpose and origin of the equipment could not be determined. The search for the missing Brennan family members became one of the largest maritime rescue operations in Alaskan history. Coast Guard vessels, aircraft, and civilian volunteers covered thousands of square miles of ocean, following every possible drift pattern and survival scenario. Ocean current models were run backward from the Kodiak Dream's discovery location to determine where 12 people wearing life jackets might have entered the water. But the search areas generated by these models yielded no results. Underwater surveys using sonar and remotely operated vehicles found no evidence of the family on the ocean floor in areas where they theoretically could have sunk. The depth of water in the search region, over 2,000 feet in many areas, made comprehensive bottom searches impossible, but the lack of any debris or personal items floating on the surface suggested the family had not simply fallen or jumped overboard. The case attracted national attention as investigators struggled to develop theories that could account for the physical evidence. The geometric navigation pattern suggested either sophisticated technical knowledge or some form of external control over the vessel's movement. The missing life jackets indicated that the family had prepared for water entry, but their organized departure from a seaworthy vessel in calm conditions made no rational sense. Maritime accident investigators consulted with experts in fields ranging from navigation electronics to mass psychology, seeking explanations for how 13 people could disappear from a functioning boat without leaving any trace of their departure method or destination. Some theories focused on the possibility of piracy or human trafficking, but the remote location and lack of valuable cargo made such scenarios unlikely. Others suggested mass suicide or cult-like behavior, but family members who knew the Brennans insisted such explanations were impossible given their close relationships and stable lives. The most disturbing discovery came from analysis of the Kodiak Dream's electronic systems. Maritime forensics experts found that the vessel's computers had recorded extensive environmental data during the hours when the family disappeared. Water temperature, salinity, magnetic field variations, and atmospheric conditions. The data collection appeared to follow scientific protocols, as if the boat had been converted into a research platform for studying oceanic phenomena. Even more puzzling were anomalous readings in the environmental data that corresponded exactly with the times when the boat was traveling its geometric pattern. Magnetic field measurements showed fluctuations that oceanographic experts insisted were impossible in open ocean conditions, while water temperature readings indicated variations that would require massive underwater thermal events. The equipment recording this data was standard maritime technology, making instrument error unlikely as an explanation. Eleanor Brennan's church in Portland organized prayer vigils and fundraising efforts to support continued search operations. while Patrick's construction company hired private investigators to pursue leads that official agencies could not follow. Margaret's colleagues in marine biology established a reward fund for information leading to any trace of the missing family members, but despite extensive publicity, no credible leads ever emerged. The Brennan family disappearance became a cautionary tale in maritime safety courses, though instructors struggled to identify specific lessons that could prevent similar incidents. The case highlighted the ocean's capacity to claim lives without explanation. But the organized nature of the disappearance and the evidence of technical modifications to the vessel suggested something far more complex than typical maritime accidents. Today, the Kodiak Dream sits in a Coast Guard impound facility in Kodiak, Alaska, preserved as evidence in a case that remains technically active, though practically unsolvable. Occasionally, maritime researchers request access to study the vessel's modified navigation systems, but none have provided explanations for the electronic modifications or the geometric navigation pattern that marked the family's final hours. The waters around the Aleutian Islands continue to attract fishing, charters, and recreational boaters, but many captains now avoid the specific area where the Kodiak Dream was found drifting empty. Local mariners speak quietly about unusual electronics readings and navigation anomalies in the region, though official maritime authorities maintain that no ongoing hazards exist in the area. The Brennan family reunion, intended to bring together 4 generations for shared adventure and renewed connections, instead created one of Alaska's most enduring maritime mysteries. 12 people seeking family bonding and oceanic adventure simply vanished from a seaworthy vessel in calm conditions, leaving behind only questions, empty life jacket compartments, and a navigation track that suggests their final hours involved something far beyond ordinary human experience. In the vast waters of the Aleutian Islands, where ocean currents carry secrets to depths that may never be explored, the Brennan family joined the countless mysteries that Alaska's waters hold forever. Former Navy SEAL Jackson Hayes from Virginia Beach thought he had seen everything during his military tours, but his solo survival training expedition in the Alaskan interior would prove that some things cannot be conquered with tactics and training. At 42, Jackson possessed credentials that few civilians could match. 12 years of active duty with SEAL Team 6, multiple deployments in hostile environments from Afghanistan to Somalia, and extensive experience in Arctic warfare training. After retiring from the Navy in 2022, he had established himself as a premier survival instructor, running courses for military contractors, law enforcement agencies, and extreme adventure enthusiasts. Jackson's decision to undertake a solo survival expedition in Alaska was both professional and personal. His training company, Arctic Edge Survival, was expanding its curriculum to include extreme cold weather survival, and Jackson needed to personally test techniques and equipment in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced operators. Additionally, he was approaching his 43rd birthday and wanted to prove to himself that civilian life had not softened the edge that military training had honed to razor sharpness. The location Jackson selected was the remote interior of the Alaska Range, approximately 150 miles southwest of Fairbanks, accessible only by bushplane during the brief summer season. The area was known for its harsh conditions, unpredictable weather, and complete isolation from human activity. Jackson's plan was ambitious even by military standards. 30 days of solo survival using only basic equipment, with the goal of documenting techniques that could be incorporated into advanced training programs. His preparation was meticulous. Jackson spent months researching weather patterns, wildlife behavior, and topographic features of the region. He consulted with Alaskan bush pilots, indigenous hunting guides, and other survival experts to understand the unique challenges of the interior wilderness. His equipment was carefully selected and tested, military-grade cold weather gear, specialized tools designed for Arctic conditions, and minimal food supplies intended to last only the first few days while he established sustainable foraging and hunting routines. Jackson's wife, Sarah, herself a former military intelligence officer, initially opposed the expedition. She understood the risks of solo operations in hostile environments and felt that civilian life should not require such extreme challenges. However, Jackson's arguments about the professional necessity of the training and his extensive preparation eventually convinced her to support the mission, though she insisted on satellite communication protocols that would allow regular contact with the outside world. On August 10, 2024, bush pilot Charlie Morrison flew Jackson to a remote landing strip carved from tundra by mining operations decades earlier. Charlie had been flying clients into Alaska's wilderness for over 20 years and was immediately impressed by Jackson's professional demeanor and obviously extensive preparation. The drop-off went smoothly, with Jackson establishing a temporary base camp and conducting equipment checks while Charlie refueled for the return flight to Fairbanks. Jackson's initial communications followed his planned schedule precisely. His first satellite phone call, made on August 12th, described successful establishment of a more permanent camp in a defensible position with access to fresh water and adequate shelter materials. His voice was confident and professional, reporting normal wildlife activity and weather conditions within expected parameters. Jackson mentioned observing caribou herds, various bird species, and signs of brown bear activity, but nothing that caused concern for an experienced operator. The second scheduled communication on August 15th revealed the first signs of unusual developments. Jackson reported that his electronic equipment was experiencing intermittent malfunctions that he could not explain through normal troubleshooting procedures. His GPS unit was showing coordinate readings that jumped randomly. His compass was giving inconsistent magnetic bearings, and his satellite phone required multiple attempts to establish connections. More concerning was Jackson's description of what he called temperature anomalies, sudden drops in air temperature that lasted for minutes at a time, even during sunny afternoon conditions. Jackson's military training had taught him to document everything meticulously, and his field journal, recovered later, showed increasingly detailed observations about environmental conditions that did not match his extensive cold weather experience. He recorded instances where morning frost appeared on vegetation despite air temperatures well above freezing, water sources that showed ice formation during the warmest parts of the day, and atmospheric phenomena that seemed to defy basic meteorological principles. By August 18th, Jackson's communications had taken on a distinctly different tone. While maintaining his characteristic military precision in reporting, he began describing wildlife behavior that challenged his understanding of animal psychology. He observed wolves, bears, and caribou interacting in ways that suggested coordination rather than natural predator-prey relationships. Most disturbing was his report that animals seemed to be deliberately avoiding his camp in patterns that formed geometric shapes when mapped on his tactical planning sheets. Jackson's background included extensive training in psychological operations and counterintelligence techniques, making him highly resistant to stress-induced paranoia or hallucinations. However, his August 22nd communication contained observations that he acknowledged sounded outside normal parameters. He described discovering what appeared to be deliberate arrangements of natural materials, stones, branches, and animal bones positioned in complex patterns that suggested intelligent design rather than random natural processes. The most unsettling aspect of Jackson's reports was his description of temperature anomalies becoming more frequent and severe. He documented instances where his breath became visible in mid-afternoon despite thermometer readings showing temperatures in the 60s, and occasions where water froze solid in his canteen while he was drinking from it. Jackson's military training had exposed him to various exotic weapon systems, leading him to consider whether he might be experiencing some form of directed energy attack or experimental military technology testing. Jackson's emergency beacon activated automatically on August 28th, transmitting a distress signal that indicated equipment malfunction rather than manual activation. Search and rescue operations were launched immediately, with Alaska State Troopers coordinating helicopter searches and ground teams mobilized from Fairbanks and other regional bases. The beacon signal led rescuers to Jackson's last known campsite, but what they found defied explanation. Jackson's camp showed signs of hasty but organized abandonment. His shelter was intact and properly secured. His equipment was carefully packed and stored according to military protocols, but Jackson himself was nowhere to be found. Most puzzling was the discovery that his survival gear had been modified in ways that demonstrated advanced technical knowledge. His GPS unit had been disassembled and rebuilt with additional components that appeared to be improvised measuring devices, and his satellite phone had been connected to a complex array of antennas and sensors constructed from salvaged materials. The centerpiece of Jackson's final camp was a detailed map he had constructed using traditional military cartographic techniques. The map showed the surrounding terrain with precision that exceeded available topographic surveys, but also included features that did not correspond to known geographic landmarks. Jackson had marked locations with symbols that seemed to represent temperature measurement points, magnetic field anomalies, and what he labeled as coordination nodes, where wildlife behavior patterns intersected. Search teams found Jackson's journal cached in a waterproof container, providing detailed insight into his final weeks in the wilderness. The entry showed systematic documentation of phenomena that challenged scientific understanding, while maintaining the analytical objectivity of military intelligence reporting. Jackson had clearly attempted to approach increasingly strange experiences with the same methodical precision he would apply to any tactical situation. The journal's final entries described Jackson's decision to conduct what he called active reconnaissance of the anomalous zones he had identified. He planned to move systematically through areas where temperature and magnetic anomalies were most pronounced, using improvised scientific instruments to collect data that might explain the phenomena he was experiencing. Jackson's last entry, dated August 27th, indicated his intention to investigate a location he had designated as Primary Anomaly Site Alpha, a valley approximately 5 miles from his base camp where multiple strange phenomena seemed to converge. Ground teams searched the valley Jackson had identified, but found only more evidence of his systematic approach to unexplained circumstances. The area contained numerous improvised measurement stations, carefully constructed arrangements of salvaged equipment designed to monitor temperature, magnetic fields, and other environmental factors. The precision and organization of these installations demonstrated Jackson's military engineering skills, but their purpose remained mysterious to civilian investigators. Most disturbing was the discovery of what appeared to be Jackson's final measurement station, located in the center of a natural clearing where the temperature anomalies he described would have been most severe. The station was more elaborate than the others, incorporating complex arrangements of reflective materials, electronic components, and geometric patterns that suggested Jackson had developed theories about the phenomena he was investigating. However, the station showed signs of sudden abandonment, with sensitive equipment left exposed to weather and measurement logs ending mid-sentence. The search for Jackson Hayes continued for over 3 weeks, covering hundreds of square miles of some of Alaska's most challenging terrain. Despite extensive aerial surveys, ground teams, and specialized tracking resources, no trace of him was ever found. The harsh environment and dangerous wildlife of the region could account for a body disappearing, but not the complete absence of any evidence indicating direction of travel or cause of departure from his established camps. Jackson's case attracted attention from military investigators familiar with his background and capabilities. Former SEAL teammates volunteered for additional search efforts, noting that Jackson's survival skills and tactical training made it extremely unlikely he would simply become lost or succumb to ordinary wilderness hazards. Some investigators theorized that Jackson might have encountered classified military testing activities, but inquiries to relevant agencies yielded no acknowledgement of operations in the region. The scientific community showed interest in Jackson's documented observations of temperature and magnetic anomalies, though most experts attributed his measurements to equipment malfunction or environmental factors unique to Alaska's interior. However, several researchers noted that Jackson's systematic approach to documenting unknown phenomena demonstrated scientific methodology that would be valuable regardless of the ultimate explanation for his experiences. Jackson's wife, Sarah, established a foundation to support search and rescue operations in Alaska, while also preserving his research materials for potential future investigation. She has consistently maintained that Jackson's military training and survival expertise made ordinary explanations for his disappearance inadequate, and that his systematic documentation of anomalous phenomena deserves serious scientific consideration. The case has become a subject of interest for researchers investigating unexplained phenomena in remote wilderness areas, particularly those involving electromagnetic anomalies and temperature variations that seem to defy known physical principles. Jackson's military background and methodical approach to documentation provide a rare case study of trained observer encountering experiences that challenge conventional understanding. Today, the remote region of the Alaska Range where Jackson Hayes disappeared remains largely unexplored, with his case serving as a cautionary tale for solo wilderness operations in extreme environments. His carefully documented observations of phenomena that seem to exist beyond normal scientific understanding continue to puzzle investigators, while his disappearance stands as proof that even the most extensively trained and prepared individuals can encounter mysteries in Alaska that no amount of experience can overcome. The survival expert who thought his military training had prepared him for any challenge ultimately discovered that Alaska's interior holds secrets that cannot be conquered through tactics, training, or superior preparation. In the vast wilderness where he sought to test his limits, Jackson Hayes found something that tested the very boundaries of human understanding, leaving behind only questions, improvised scientific equipment, and the disturbing possibility that some aspects of Alaska's wilderness operate according to principles that exist beyond the reach of even the most skilled and determined explorers. At 68 years old, retired teacher Patricia Williams from North Carolina finally had the time and money to fulfill her lifelong dream of seeing the Northern Lights. But her solo RV journey through Alaska would become her final adventure. Patricia had spent 43 years teaching elementary school in Charlotte, watching countless students grow up while she postponed her own dreams for retirement. Her husband, Robert, had passed away 2 years earlier after a brief battle with cancer, leaving her financially secure but emotionally adrift. The Alaska trip represented more than tourism. It was Patricia's declaration that widowhood would not define her remaining years. Patricia's fascination with the aurora borealis began in childhood when her grandfather, a former merchant marine, showed her photographs from his voyages to northern ports. She had collected books, documentaries, and scientific articles about the phenomenon for decades, turning her spare bedroom into an informal library dedicated to Arctic exploration and indigenous cultures. Her lesson plans often incorporated stories about Alaska's history and geography, inspiring students with tales of adventure in America's last frontier. Planning the trip took Patricia over a year of meticulous preparation. She purchased a well-maintained Class C recreational vehicle, a 28-foot Winnebago that would serve as both transportation and accommodation during her month-long journey. Patricia researched campgrounds, road conditions, and weather patterns with the same thoroughness she had once applied to curriculum development. She took RV driving courses, learned basic mechanical maintenance, and equipped the vehicle with emergency supplies rated for Arctic conditions. Her adult children initially opposed the solo journey. Patricia's daughter Jennifer, a nurse in Denver, worried about her mother's safety traveling alone through remote regions. Her son David, an attorney in Raleigh, tried to convince her to join a guided tour group instead of attempting the journey independently. But Patricia was determined to experience Alaska on her own terms, without the constraints of scheduled tours or group dynamics that might limit her to chase the aurora displays whenever and wherever they appeared. Patricia departed Charlotte on September 3, 2024, driving the Alaskan Highway through Canada toward Alaska. Her detailed itinerary, shared with family members, included regular check-in schedules and emergency contact information for every planned stop. She maintained a travel blog that she updated daily with photographs and descriptions of her progress, sharing her excitement with former colleagues and students who followed her adventure online. The first 3 weeks of Patricia's journey exceeded her expectations. She photographed wildlife in the Canadian Rockies, toured historical sites in Dawson City, and finally crossed into Alaska near Tok on September 25th. Her blog entries during this period showed genuine joy and wonder at the landscape she was experiencing, mixed with occasional homesickness for the familiar routines of her previous life. Patricia's writing revealed someone rediscovering her sense of adventure after decades focused on others' needs. Her planned destination was Fairbanks, where she intended to establish a base camp for aurora viewing expeditions to darker locations outside the city. Patricia's research had identified several remote areas along the Steese Highway, where light pollution would not interfere with aurora photography. She had invested in high-quality camera equipment and taken night photography courses specifically to document the northern lights she had dreamed of seeing for so many years. Patricia's last confirmed location was a rest area along the Richardson Highway, approximately 60 miles south of Fairbanks, where she stopped on October 2nd to update her blog and call her daughter. The conversation, according to Jennifer, was typical of their recent communications, Patricia describing the stunning autumn colors and expressing excitement about reaching Fairbanks within hours. She mentioned slight fatigue from the long driving days, but was eager to begin aurora watching as solar activity forecasts predicted excellent viewing conditions. When Patricia failed to arrive at her reserved campground in Fairbanks by October 4th, the facility manager contacted Alaska State Troopers. Her family had also grown concerned when her blog updates stopped and phone calls went unanswered. The search began immediately, focusing on the Richardson Highway route between her last known location and Fairbanks. The terrain along this corridor is relatively developed by Alaskan standards with regular traffic and emergency services, making a disappearance seem unlikely. Troopers found Patricia's RV on October 6th, parked at a scenic overlook approximately 30 miles north of her last confirmed stop. The vehicle was positioned properly in the designated parking area with no signs of mechanical problems or collision damage. The engine was still running, maintained by the RV's automatic systems, and all interior lights were functioning normally. Patricia's coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, still containing liquid that investigations later determined had been poured approximately 72 hours earlier. The interior of the RV provided disturbing insights into Patricia's final hours. Her personal belongings were arranged as if she had been preparing for bed. Pajamas laid out on the bed, reading glasses placed on the nightstand beside a book about Alaska's indigenous peoples. Her camera equipment was set up near the RV's large rear window, positioned for aurora photography with technical settings that demonstrated her new expertise in night photography. Most puzzling was the discovery that Patricia's security camera system installed to monitor the area around the RV during overnight stops had captured her final hours in detail. The footage showed Patricia following her normal evening routine until approximately 3:15 a.m. on October 3rd, when she suddenly rose from her bed and walked to the RV's door. The camera clearly recorded her opening the door and stepping outside, wearing only light pajamas despite temperatures near freezing. The security footage showed Patricia walking calmly away from the RV toward the forest edge, moving with apparent purpose rather than confusion or distress. She did not appear to be responding to any external sound or threat, and her body language suggested intentional action rather than sleepwalking or medical emergency. Most disturbing was what the infrared cameras captured in the final frames. Patricia stopping at the tree line and appearing to interact with something or someone outside the camera's range before walking into the dense forest and disappearing from view. Analysis of the security footage by digital forensics experts revealed no evidence of other people in the area, mechanical malfunctions in the recording equipment, or any obvious explanation for Patricia's behavior. The timestamp showed that she had been outside for less than 5 minutes before vanishing into the wilderness wearing inadequate clothing for survival in near-freezing conditions. Her footprints were clearly visible in the frost-covered ground, leading directly into the forest with no indication of struggle or force. Search teams found Patricia's trail easily at first, following her bare footprints through the forest for approximately half a mile. The prints showed she had walked steadily in a straight line, navigating around obstacles but maintaining a consistent northward direction. However, the trail ended abruptly at a small clearing where her footprints simply stopped with no indication of where she had gone next. The clearing showed no signs of disturbance, vehicle tracks, or any explanation for how Patricia could have continued without leaving traces. Extensive searches covered over 200 square miles of wilderness, using helicopters, trained tracking dogs, and thermal imaging equipment. Despite favorable weather conditions and numerous volunteer searchers familiar with the terrain, no additional evidence of Patricia Williams was ever found. The forest in the area was dense but not impassable, and the relatively mild October weather should have allowed survival for several days, even in inadequate clothing. Investigation into Patricia's background revealed no history of mental illness, sleepwalking, or behavior that might explain her actions. Medical records showed she was in excellent health for her age, taking only mild medications for blood pressure and cholesterol that would not cause confusion or altered behavior. Her family insisted that Patricia was practical, safety-conscious, and entirely rational during their final conversations. The case attracted attention from researchers studying sleepwalking and other parasomnia disorders, but Patricia's age and lack of previous episodes made such explanations unlikely. Sleep specialists noted that complex behaviors like opening doors and walking long distances rarely occurred during sleepwalking episodes, particularly in elderly individuals. The purposeful nature of her movement, captured on security cameras, suggested conscious decision-making rather than unconscious behavior. More troubling were reports from other travelers who had stayed at the same scenic overlook during the weeks before Patricia's disappearance. Multiple RV travelers contacted authorities after news of the case broke, describing strange dreams and unusual compulsions they had experienced while parked at the location. Several reported dreaming about walking into the forest, while others mentioned feeling inexplicably drawn to explore the area during nighttime hours. Indigenous elders from nearby communities, when consulted by investigators, shared traditional stories about the region that included warnings about locations where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds became thin. These oral traditions described places where people might be called to join ancient spirits, particularly during times of personal transition or loss. While such explanations were not considered in official investigations, they provided cultural context for phenomena that defied conventional understanding. Patricia's family established a foundation offering rewards for information about her disappearance, but no credible leads ever emerged. Her RV was eventually returned to North Carolina, where her children discovered her completed travel journal documenting every day of her journey until the final entry. The last entry, made on the evening before her disappearance, expressed deep satisfaction with her adventure and anticipation for aurora viewing opportunities in the coming days. The journal's final passage read, "I feel more alive than I have in years. Alaska has awakened something in me that I thought died with Robert. Tomorrow I begin the part of this journey I have dreamed about since childhood. Whatever happens, I am grateful for this chance to discover who I am when I am truly alone with the wild beauty of this incredible place." Today, Patricia Williams remains one of Alaska's most perplexing missing person cases. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about solo travel in remote areas, though the specific circumstances of her disappearance offer few practical lessons for prevention. The security camera footage continues to puzzle investigators, showing a rational woman making what appeared to be a conscious decision to walk into wilderness that would claim her life. The scenic overlook where Patricia's RV was found has since been avoided by some travelers who report feeling uncomfortable or experiencing unusual dreams when staying overnight at the location. Park rangers and state troopers occasionally patrol the area but have found no additional evidence related to her disappearance or explanations for the phenomena reported by other visitors. Patricia's case represents the profound mysteries that Alaska holds for those who venture too far from familiar territory. A woman who had spent her entire career nurturing others finally claimed time for her own dreams only to vanish while pursuing the northern lights she had longed to see. In the vast wilderness of America's last frontier, Patricia Williams joined the countless souls who have walked into Alaska's embrace and never returned, leaving behind only questions about what calls to some people from the deep forests and endless skies of the most mysterious state in America. Her retirement adventure, meant to begin a new chapter of independence and discovery, instead became a final mystery that continues to haunt investigators and family members, searching for answers that may exist beyond the reach of conventional understanding. In Alaska, where the line between the possible and impossible blurs like aurora lights dancing across the midnight sky, Patricia Williams discovered that some dreams carry prices that cannot be calculated until the moment when it becomes too late to change course and return to the safety of the known world.